All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, on our online educators. We're about to get started on our digital workshop. As you can see in some of the cameras, we have our in-person educators as well here at the TGR Learning Lab in Anaheim. Very excited to have you all join us in our digital and in-person workshop on unpacking student engagements. So what we're gonna do is I'm actually gonna kick it off to Holly Denard to help us get started with this digital workshop. Let me send this.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome, yes, welcome to our workshop on unpacking student engagement. My name is Holly Denard. I'm going to be working with you all as a facilitator today. I'm a professional development facilitator here at the TGR Foundation, and I'm super excited to have you all here. I'm going to kind of swing around over here and have our in-person audience wave to our online audience. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to David right now so he can introduce himself a little bit more and dive into a little bit about background of TGR EDU Create.
All right, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you're coming from. My name is David Tong with TGR EDU Create. And this program is essentially a professional learning program really to help promote interdisciplinary practices, inquiry-based instruction, and really focusing on the student to help them explore different things in STEM, college access, and other career connections. So today we have an exciting workshop for you all to participate in and engage in. For those of you in our digital community, educator community, we're looking to make this as hands-on as possible, hands-on as in virtual hands-on. So I'll give you various instructions throughout the morning. In the meantime, again, we'll collaborate with our in-person educators here in this building.
All right. So I want to talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing. So I'm going to run through our agenda for this morning. We're going to start with a hands-on collaborative activity. So you're going to be taking off your educator hat here for a little bit, and you're going to be putting on your student hat, and then we're going to be able to reflect a little bit about what that activity meant. What does it matter? Why does engagement matter? And then finally, we're going to be reflecting on our own practice. So we're not only are we going to be involved in an activity, but we're also going to talk about the why behind engagement and then reflect on our own practice. All right. So we're going to go ahead and get going with the explanation behind what you're going to be doing. So we're going to start off with this collaborative activity. We're going to be doing a little bit of classification. So we're going to be using some manipulatives for those of you guys online. You're going to have some digital manipulatives. For those of us in person, we're going to have some physical manipulatives to work with. We're going to be taking those manipulatives or a bag of variety of different organisms, and we're going to be doing a sorting activity for 1 or 2 minutes. You're just going to take those manipulatives, either physical or digital manipulatives, and you're going to determine which are insects and which are not insects. So 1 or 2 minutes to make that kind of distinction. From there, we're going to use what we consider to be identified as our insect group. We're going to push the non-insects away, our insect groups. We're going to be grouping them collectively with your table group or your online group into similar characteristics. So what do we think all of these insects, how we might group them together? Okay, then you're going to give each of the groups that you've identified a title and an explanation on what your group's thought process was around putting them into those particular groups. And then you're going to get an avenue to display your work creatively. So we're going to be using a poster paper and some markers, and those of you guys online, David will be talking to you a little bit more about how you will be doing your visual representation. So I'm going to turn it over to, well, let me explain a little bit more. Table groups, you have chart paper, markers, like I said, those manipulatives, after you've sorted your insects and non-insects, we'll have about 15 minutes in order to group the insects and then display them creatively on our board, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and get going. David's gonna dive in a little bit more with our online audience, exactly how you're going to be digitally doing the same thing that our in-person audience is doing as well. And then we'll come back in about 15 minutes or so and share out what we've come up with. All right, so our in-person audience, you have a bag there. Go ahead.
All right, so what I just needed, Holly, just so I can talk with you all in the online educator community. So again, we're using this activity to help you kind of look into the perspective of this as a student, right, and seeing how engaged you are throughout this process. So, as you're doing this as a student, also kind of have that educator hat on every so often to kind of think about, how were you engaged throughout this? Because this is going to lead us into the conversation about student engagement as we talk further into this digital workshop today. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to break you all into small breakout rooms using Zoom's breakout room feature. And we're going to be using Google Slides. So each group will be getting a specific Google slide that I will share the link to when I hop into your room, where you can collaboratively manipulate the images, kind of like what Holly said. Just pretend you have actually a poster paper, right? So you're going to have one slide with all these different images, and then there will be about 15 different bugs. And so as Holly mentioned, there's a couple different tasks. I've actually put those directions into the Google slide so you all can refer to them to do the activity in your small groups. And after about 15 minutes, we're going to come back together in the whole group to share out one example from our in-person and also our online educator audience. Okay. So what I'm going to do right now is once I hit the breakout room button, all of you all will be going automatically into breakout rooms. If there's any issues, I'll kind of hang out in the main room for a little bit. But what I'd like for you to do first is once you get into your breakout rooms, there's going to be about 3 to 4 people. Go ahead and actually introduce yourselves. You can say what your name, where you're from. And we're going to actually, I think it would be best to designate roles, right, to help you facilitate the actual group activity. So, for example, one would be a timekeeper, right? There will be specific minutes to kind of keep you guys on track within the 15 minutes. There's also, I think, a navigator who would help be kind of responsible for moving the images around, which ones are insects, which ones are not, and then, whatever classification you want to place them in, and perhaps even a scribe. So someone that can use the text box tool. It's just that little T on the very top that you can just click on and maybe add some text, just be creative, add any other types of shapes or symbols you want. It's just using Google Slide. It's very helpful to perhaps even type out your group's thought process, right? So it's a very open type of activity here, just a kind of a virtual poster, okay? So what I'm gonna do first is now break you all out into rooms of 3 to 4. Once I hit this button here, let's see, you all should be able to transition automatically. Okay.
Thank you so much for participating in this. I want to welcome back our online audience as well. Thank you for engaging in this activity with us. I want to go ahead and share a little bit about what our in-person audience produced, and then we'd love to be able to see what our online audience came up with as well. So we have one of our posters or illustrations here, and I'm going to invite one of the team members that came up with our particular poster and have her go explain a little bit about what is going on here in this poster. So this is Denise. Everybody online audience? All right, thank you.
All right, so coming from the most non-scientific person here, but I am very excited to kind of describe our board. So the way we kind of classified some of our insects and non-insects, for example, on the top right corner, we kind of classify insects with wings, but can also crawl.
Wings and crawling.
Yeah, so, and then the other thing too, we actually separated butterflies and flies into different ways. Although these two can transform, butterflies actually go through metamorphosis.
Whoa,
so that's the way
look at the scientific language coming out.
Yeah, there goes my science lingo. And then, so that's how we kind of classified that. And then we also had insects that were ground workers, but who also like moisture. So that's how we classify that. And then here, the non-insects, obviously.
Stop sign. All right. Thank you, Denise. Thank you to everybody that participated and came up with these amazing posters. David, do we want to have our online audience as well share out what they've been doing for the past 15 minutes or so?
Yeah, so actually I'm gonna have Gina share with us group on the screen. I'll just share their poster here. So go ahead and check that out. And Gina, go ahead and share your thought process and what your group did.
Okay, sure, thanks. So I'm Gina, and my group went ahead and separated the insects according to what you see. And I'm not going to lie, some of my limited knowledge about insects and whatnot, it was kind of a struggle. So in the end, we decided to group them according to the insects with the showing. And then we noted that these insects in the lower right corner had kind of an elongated insect body type, and their wings were not showing. And this ant doesn't necessarily have wings, but we know that the queen ants usually do, but this, ant does not have wings showing. And the caterpillar, because it has not metamorphosized into a butterfly, it does not have wings showing necessarily. And then this little ladybug is kind of caught to the side because it doesn't necessarily have the elongated body type. However, it does not have its wings showing. It needs to be unfolded before you actually see the wings underneath that help it fly. So this is what we ended up with.
Awesome, thank you.
All right, thank you so much. That's awesome, looks fantastic. Thank you so much. All right, so what we're gonna move into now is that next piece of the workshop. We're gonna be talking about engagement. So I'm gonna throw it out to not only in person, but our online audience as well, to share some ways in which you felt engaged. So now we're taking off that student hat. We're reflecting as an educator here. What did engagement look like and feel like to you as you were going through this activity? So if you wouldn't mind, in-person audience, you're going to be raising a hand and sharing out a couple of thoughts that you have, and our online audience will be sharing out in the chat box some ways in which you felt you were engaged during this bug activity that I know bugged a lot of us, no pun intended. But anyway, what did engagement look like? How did this feel? Thanks, George.
I thought it was accessible to a diverse group.
Accessible to a diverse group. Love it. Thank you. Excellent. Kenny.
I would build on that by saying, like, if you didn't have knowledge of bugs, or you didn't remember all the ones you've seen, having the physical bugs there gave everybody equal playing field, or at least somewhere to meet to talk about what the differences were. Okay, so it's felt like everybody was contributing and offering what they know about insects. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah, thank you.
I think that within our group, we were just thinking in very different terms, like when it came to like how many wings they had and so forth, but we were thinking more like, what do they do? Like, what's their purpose? But then also looking at the groups online and seeing how they were able to organize, that was really neat. So.
All right, so both ways you felt like there were ways to contribute to your poster, how you group things. Yeah. Anybody else? What does engagement look like or felt like to you during this?
Yeah, I felt very focused with my group on what we were doing. I wasn't thinking about time. I wasn't thinking about other people were doing. I was just like here, and we were talking about it and really.
Okay. All right, so you weren't really trying to figure out what somebody else was doing or another group, or thinking about the next thing you were going to do during the day. Very, very intensely focused.
I feel like too, there wasn't necessarily a right or a wrong answer. You could sit and you could discuss things and group it into different categories and change, and so it was very fluid. So you didn't have a lot of pressure to be like, oh God, I don't remember what these bugs are, but I can separate them into different things. So
yeah, so you didn't feel like I don't really know. I just am going to contribute the things that I do have and what my prior knowledge is. All right, great job. So some of our responses are displayed up here. David, do you want to share out a few of our online responses?
Yeah, so we had a few here. So it's, a couple of our educators stated time constraints were clear, and that also allowed for the educators to have roles to make sure that they were on task. Learning through discussion, so there was a good amount of collaboration among the peers. Engagement shown as interest in terms of what was said by others. So hearing what people were saying and kind of taking that value. And then finally, it was also necessary to know what other participants were doing on the slides to know what was going on. So kind of aware of what was happening at that current time.
All right, awesome, great reflection here. So thanks for sharing. What we're gonna do now is I'm passing out to our in-person audience a hard copy of the 3 different types of engagement. And our online community, David's going to be sharing a PDF of this same document. We're going to be looking at now at not just how we were engaged, but in what manner were we engaged? Yes. All right, as we're doing this, I'm going to go over the hard copies in just one moment, but as you can see up on the board, there's behavioral engagement, emotional engagement, and cognitive engagement. So looking at a little bit more in depth, let's start with behavioral engagement. And behavioral engagement really is those things that you're noticing at school. Are students following, for instance, school rules? Are they participating in school activities and functions? They're coming up with their own ideas. So those are all examples of what's referred to as behavioral engagement. Okay, we're going to go back to our responses that we just presented here in a second. But as we go through these, we're going to kind of dissect, look at our responses on how we were engaged in the etymology activity and determine whether or not we think it was behavioral, emotional, or cognitive. Okay, so then we move on to emotional engagement. So that's really being comfortable with your peers, engaging in group learning, asking questions and feeling comfortable asking questions, and you're interested, inquisitive about the academic content. So that's all your falls into that emotional engagement. And then last is cognitive engagement. So cognitive engagement is really just that. You want to be engaged with the content of it, of the lesson. You want or desire challenges. You're self-regulating, and you're also engaged in your own learning. You're taking ownership of your own learning. Any quick thoughts about those 3 types of engagement? All right. So what we're gonna look back at now as some of the responses that we had to our engagement, to our entomology activity. And we're gonna look at it and whether or not we feel like it's emotional, behavioral, or cognitive engagement, okay? So what we need to do right now is you're gonna log on, if everyone will just take a moment. We're going to be using this site for a couple of different activities here. So go ahead and stay logged on after you're on, but you're going to log into menti.com. It's going to ask you for a code, and the code is displayed right here at the top of the screen. It's 471521. So take a moment. Let everybody log on to menti.com.
Do we need to space it?
No, don't worry about spacing on the numbers, the code. All right, awesome. Looks like we've got some responses already. Our first response to how did you feel engaged was everyone was able to contribute their prior knowledge. So how do we feel? Was that cognitive, behavioral, or emotional?
And some of you might feel like it might be a combination of 2 or 3 of these. You can select multiple types of engagement as well.
Yeah, so I think what we're seeing here is that we all have a different idea on how we were engaged emotionally, behaviorally, or cognitively. So we're going to kind of keep this in mind. We have a couple more responses. We're going to be doing the same exact thing. You're going to share out what you think in terms of these 3 types of engagement. All right, so we have a pretty high end of emotional engagement on that particular response. Our next one, oops, sorry. Next one is designating roles with clear time constraints. What type of engagement? Has some really quick responses. Looks like most of us are leaning towards behavioral engagement. We're taking on roles. Do we see that we're void in any type of engagement at this point? Or do we have a mixture or balance of all 3 types?
I see a mixture.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And then we're going to go to our last response here. Learning through discussion with peers. What type of engagement does that bring about? I think we have emotional engagement as being the strongest. Anyone will reflect why? Let's share out one reason why you chose, for instance, emotional engagement. Anyone that chose that? Kenny, why did you choose emotional?
On the placemat, I see comfort and connection, and so the opportunity to discuss something with my peers is going to bring out an emotional engagement in me as a student.
Yeah, having that comfort to be able to share my own thoughts and ideas really asks us to be emotionally connected with our team members. All right.
And I have one response. Gina shared, emotional engagements require that you're comfortable with your peers. So it's important to be able to learn through discussion when you're able to communicate effectively with each other.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, David, for sharing out ideas and thoughts from our online group. All right. So we're going to move on now to reflecting a little bit on our own ways in which activities that we do in our own learning environments, and share out something that you do, currently do to promote any of these types of engagement. For instance, I'll give you an example of one thing that I have done in the past is I use a visual cue. I present a picture where I ask students to look at, make observations about a particular photo. What do you know is happening in that picture? What do you want to know more about? And what are you wondering? So that is one way in which I bring engagement into the classroom. Want to know from all of you all how you and what some of the things that you do in your own learning environments to bring about the engagement in your classroom. So go ahead, you can go back into Menti, share out a few thoughts and ideas about your own practice and how you bring engagement. And
to our online educators, again, use this moment, this few minutes to share on Menti, so we can capture some of the responses as well, and we'll discuss in a few minutes.
Sketchnoting. Seeing some great responses here. Thank you so much for sharing some of these. I noticed one comment was working with eighth graders this morning on sketchnoting using visual note-taking and making connections with words and images. That's awesome.
I like the statement of doing group work and think their share of engagement's low. When they're more comfortable sharing, when they're not comfortable sharing out in a large group, being able to emotionally engage them, smaller groups is always great.
Awesome. Anything else, David, that you see?
Yeah, project-based learning, right? It's a great way to engage all three, using all three types of engagement throughout the various ways of promoting the driving questions. So, good. Here's a great example. Powtoons. It's a web-based tool. Students enjoy the activity and genuinely wanted them to be on task. So there's a bit of emotional engagement on there as well. Allows for creativity, so students felt like unique individuals were participating, and the task was standards aligned, right? So being able to apply a web-based tool to make it cognitively demanding. Great, thank you for contributing that. Let's see, and let's share this one. I actually like this right here. Looks like you would use the I see, I think, and I wonder, kind of a 3-column chart after looking at pictures and graphs to generate individual thought and group discussion. All right. Let's see. Let's throw in this last one here. For those of you that use Socratic seminars, Socratic circles before, there's a high level of cognitive engagement for sure, right? And also highest gains for emotional engagements. The activity also benefit from more structure and just access to the content. Great, thank you for sharing those responses. As you can see, there's plenty to kind of think about and reflect on this. But I'll hand it back over to Holly to kind of give us a little summary of the morning.
All right, thanks, David. I am just so inspired by all the work that you guys both are doing with your students in your learning environments. This is fantastic. A little bit of a summary about these 3 types of engagement. They don't happen in isolation. As we saw from our responses on Menti, that the ultimate learning takes place when we are engaging our students in all 3 types of engagement, not just our emotional, not just our behavioral or cognitive, but when they're all blended together, promotes that ultimate learning experience for our students. So I really want to thank you guys for participating. You guys have been great audience, both in person and our online participants. Thank you so much. I also want to leave you all with my favorite quote from Benjamin Franklin, which says, "Tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me and I will learn. So thanks you guys for being here. David's going to give us a little bit of information about a survey. So I'm going to turn it back over to David.
All right, again, thanks for joining us to the online educators and being, interactive with using our Google Slides and almost feeling like you were here, hopefully. I did on this slide here, I'm sharing a few of our locations where we're having our multi-day STEM studios this summer. So to jump on that list and get more information about dates and how to register and enroll in those free professional development programs, jump into that link below and join that educator community if you haven't already done so. tgrfoundation.org/educator-community. Again, feel free to share that with other educators who are interested in growing and learning more about improving their best practices. And then for those that are online in our educator community right now, I'm going to share with you a link to a survey. And we would much appreciate any feedback that you have regarding today's experience. All right. Other than that, thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you guys soon. For all the online educators, I'll stick around for a little bit. If you have any questions or you want to chat and say hi, I'll be around for a few minutes. All right. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, online.